Emmanuel Swedenborg's Guide to the Afterlife and the Importance of the Human Connection to God remains one of the most celebrated Enlightenment-era works on the subject. Philosopher and Christian mystic Emmanuel Swedenborg's classic Heaven and Hell, originally published in Latin during the mid-18th century, Swedenborg's treatise contains rich allusions not merely to the realms of the afterlife, but also to the principles of Christianity, albeit a mystical Christianity. It also delves into the nature of marriage, an argument against polygamy, and the concept of a spirit world. Not against those, but against polygamy. And how spiritual matters influence humans' will are some of the notions raised by Swedenborg that render his thoughts enchanting. According to Swedenborg, the entirety of this text, the classic Heaven and Hell, of which is in the public domain, and of which I am selectively narrating some segments. This text was inspired after he had received a divine revelation from God himself, and thus started experiencing visions or trance-like states where he received communications from the higher realms where the angels exist. The heavens, if you will. This was simply the notion that God is the very essence of love in the universe, and that his divine force intends for every human being to go to heaven. He never descends into anger or hatred, and the traversal of every human spirit into heaven was his intention by the very act of creation. This author's mission is to soundly reconcile Christ's teaching with the familiar concepts of the afterlife, with his own philosophical thoughts on the importance of the human spirit, together with scientific considerations such as time and space, constructing a sound theology, although it was in the early Enlightenment era. In these pages was an ambitious task. Yet, Emmanuel Swedenborg approached these profound subjects with articulate and definite clarity. This work, known by its complete title, Heaven and Its Wonders in Hell from Things Heard, and if I'm not mistaken, there's a Netflix program called Things That Were Heard, or From Things Heard and Seen. Apparently this has to do, or was inspired by Swedenborg's work. So check that out. Things Heard and Seen, I suppose, was the title. I'm not sure if that's completely correct, but close enough. It has since been thought an influence upon Mormon theology, surprisingly, particularly the sections in which Swedenborg contemplates the nature of the stars and the astronomical heavens. Now, in continuing narrating selected segments from this work, this classic known as Swedenborg's Heaven and Hell, we've spoken of heaven in previous posts, and I've done at least 5 or more. So we're going to switch up a little bit and consider what Swedenborg says concerning hell. So, this, to break the monotony, if there be monotony at all, This is entitled "The Lord Rules the Hells." Quote, "Above, in treating of heaven, it has been everywhere shown that the God of heaven is the Lord, thus that the whole government of the heavens is the Lord's government, and as the relation of heaven to hell and of hell to heaven is like the relation between two opposites which mutually act contrary to each other, and from the action and reaction of which an equilibrium results, which gives performance to all things of their action and reaction. So, in order that all things and each thing may be kept in equilibrium, it is necessary that he who rules, the one should rule the other. For unless the same Lord restrained the upstrings from the hells and checked insanities, there the equilibrium would perish and everything with it. But something about that equilibrium shall first be told. It is acknowledged that when two things mutually act against each other, and as much as one reacts and resists the other, acts and impels, since there is equal power on either side, neither has any effect, and both can then be acted upon freely by a third. For when the force of the two is neutralized by equal opposition, the force of a third has full effect, and acts as easily as if there were no opposition. Perhaps an interjection here, perhaps the concept of the spiritual war between heaven and hell, so to speak, or the war in heaven as depicted in Revelation 12, or the struggle between the opposites, God, Satan, humanity, and such. Perhaps when it seems there is no opposition, this is the time when we could probably say and understand why this struggle between these said opposites has been called the invisible war. Because from moment to moment, at any given moment, the opposition could be at a peak, and then suddenly equilibrium results, and then there's no opposition. So ultimately, people probably dismiss this and say, well, there's no spiritual war going on because there's no apparent opposition taking place. Okay, this is at the point when the opposites are neutralizing one to the other. And so it seems that no opposition is occurring at the moment, but this could change from moment to moment at any given moment. That's sort of how it works. Continuing, such is the equilibrium between heaven and hell. Yes, it is not an equilibrium like that between two bodily combatants whose strength is equal, but it is a spiritual equilibrium. That is, an equilibrium of falsity against truth and evil against good. From hell, falsity from evil continually exhales, and from heaven, truth from good. It is this spiritual equilibrium that causes man to think and will in freedom, for whatever a man thinks and wills has reference either to evil and falsity therefrom, or to good and truth therefrom. Therefore, when he is in that equilibrium, he is in freedom either to admit or accept evil and its falsity from hell, or to admit or accept good and its truth from heaven. Every man is held in this equilibrium by the Lord, because the Lord rules both heaven and hell. Unlike popular pop culture concerning the devil, who apparently rules hell, has his own realm to rule, according to this, that concept is utterly false. Continuing. But why man is held in this freedom by such an equilibrium, and why evil and falsity are not taken away from him and good and truth implanted in him by divine power, will be told hereafter in its own chapter. A perception of the sphere of falsity from evil that flows forth from hell has often been granted me, says Swedenborg. It was like a perpetual effort to destroy all that is good and true, combined with anger and a kind of fury at not being able to do so. Especially an effort to annihilate and destroy the divine of the Lord. And this because all good and truth are from him. But out of heaven a sphere of truth from good was perceived, whereby the fury of the effort ascending from hell was restrained. The result of this was an equilibrium. This sphere from heaven was perceived to come from the Lord alone, although it appeared to come from the angels in heaven. It is from the Lord alone and not from the angels, because every angel in heaven acknowledges that nothing of good and of truth is from himself, but all is from the Lord. In the spiritual world, truth from good is the source of all power, and falsity from evil has no power whatever. This is because the divine itself in heaven is divine good and divine truth, and all power belongs to the divine. Falsity from evil is powerless, because truth from good is the source of all power. And in falsity from evil, there is nothing of truth from good. Consequently, in heaven there is all power and none in hell. For everyone in heaven is in truths from good, and everyone in hell is in falsities from evil. For no one is admitted into heaven until he is in truths from good. Neither is anyone cast down into hell until he is in falsities from evil. That this is so can be seen in the chapters treating of the first, second, and third states of man after death, and that all power belongs to truth from good can be seen in the chapter on the power of angels in heaven. Such then is the equilibrium between heaven and hell. And I would add, it can be perceived that there's definitely a fine line between these within perceptions. Those who are in the world of spirits are in that equilibrium, for the world of spirits is midway between heaven and hell. From the same source, all men in the world are kept in a like equilibrium, since men in the world are ruled by the Lord by means of spirits in the world of spirits, as will be and regulated both sides. Pardon, I skipped. As will be shown, rather, hereafter in its own chapter. No equilibrium would be possible unless the Lord ruled both heaven and hell, and regulated both sides. Otherwise, falsities from evil would preponderate, and would affect the simple good who are in equilibrium would perish. and with it freedom in men. Hell, like heaven, is divided into societies, and into as many societies as there are in heaven. For every society in heaven has a society opposite to it in hell, and this for the sake of equilibrium. But evils and falsities therefrom are what distinguishes the societies in hell, as goods and truths therefrom are what distinguish the societies in heaven. That for every good there is an opposite evil, and for every truth an opposite falsity may be known from this, that nothing can exist without relation to its opposite. And what anything is in kind and degree can be known from its opposite, and from this all perception and sensation is derived. For this reason, the Lord continually provides that every society in heaven shall have an opposite in some society of hell, and that there shall be an equilibrium between the two. As hell is divided into the same number of societies as heaven, there are as many hells as there are societies of heaven, for as each society of heaven is a heaven in smaller form, so each society in hell is a hell in smaller form. As in general there are three heavens, so in general there are three hells, a lowest, which is opposite to the inmost or third heaven, a middle, which is opposite to the middle or second heaven, and a higher, which is opposite to the utmost or first heaven. From the hell, how the hells are ruled by the Lord shall be briefly explained. In general, the hells are ruled by a general outflow from the heavens of divine good and divine truth, whereby the general endeavor flowing forth from the hells is checked and restrained. Also, by a particular outflow from each heaven and from each society of heaven, the hells are ruled in particular by means of the angels, to whom it is granted to look into the hells and to restrain insanities and disturbances there. And sometimes angels are sent to them who moderate these insanities and disturbances by their presence. But in general, all in the hells are ruled by means of their fears. Some are ruled by fears implanted in the world and still inherent in them. But as these fears are not sufficient and gradually subside, they are ruled by fears of punishments. And it is especially by these that they are deterred from doing evil. The punishments in hell are manifold, lighter or more severe in accordance with the evils. For the most part, the more wicked, who excel in cunning and artifices, and who are able to hold the rest in subjection and servitude by means of punishments and consequent terror, are set over them. But these governors dare not pass by the limits prescribed to them. It must be understood that the sole means of restraining the violence and fury of those who are in the hells is the fear of punishment. There is no other way. It has been believed heretofore in the world that there is one devil that presides over the hells, that he was created an angel of light, but having become rebellious, he was cast down with his crew into hell. This belief has prevailed because the devil and Satan, and also Lucifer, are mentioned by name in the Word, and the Word in those places has been understood according to the sense of the letter. But by the devil and Satan, their hell is meant devil, meaning the hell that is behind, where the worst dwell, who are called evil genii, and Satan, the hell that is in front, where the less wicked dwell, who are called evil spirits, and Lucifer, those that belong to Babel or Babylon, who would extend their dominion even into heaven. That there is no one devil to whom the hells are subject is evident also from this, that all who are in the hells, like all who are in the heavens, are from the human race, and that those who have gone from the beginning of creation to this time amount to myriads of myriads, and every one of them is a devil in accord with his opposition to the divine while he lived in the world. If you were to study the Christian mystics, you would come to the conclusion that most of them thought that heaven and hell were not physical places that we go to after death, but rather states of consciousness that we experience here and now. And we choose one or the other. And with that, I'll close out this reading on the subject of hell from Swedenborg's classic Heaven and Hell with a quote by John Milton from his Paradise Lost. And I find this quote quite intriguing. The mind, in and of itself, can make a heaven of hell or a hell of heaven. Whichever way I fly, said Satan, is hell. And that says a mouthful. To be continued on the subject of hell, we will delve further from Swedenborg's classic Heaven and Hell. Thank you for listening.